वेलकम बैक टू अनदर एपिसोड ऑफ थॉट बिहाइंड थिंग्स। आज मेरे साथ मौजूद हैं दो बहुत ही खास मेहमान एंड इनको बुलाने का मकसद ये था कि आने वाले 2-1 दिन में OIC की कॉन्फ्रेंस हो रही है, बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट कॉन्फ्रेंस है, बड़े अरसे बाद इस लेवल के ऊपर हो रही है पाकिस्तान में। एंड विद द चेंजिंग सिनारियोज अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड, इट्स वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट कि मुस्लिम वर्ल्ड जो है वो यूनाइटेड एक फेस लेकर सामने आए और वो जो मेजर प्रॉब्लम्स फेस हो रही हैं मुसलमानों को ओवरऑल दुनिया भर में, उसके सोल्यूशंस के ऊपर गेट टुगेदर एंड रियली फिगर दैट आउट। फॉर दिस वी हैव टू वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट गेस्ट्स, Asim Iftikhar Ahmad Saab, who is the Foreign Office spokesperson for Pakistan, and Rizwan Saeed Sheikh Saab, who is the permanent representative to the OIC from Pakistan. So thank you so much for being part of the show.
Thank you.
मैं कॉन्वर्सेशन को स्टार्ट करूँगा just trying to understand कि why do you think this particular conference जो OIC की अभी हो रही है पाकिस्तान में, I believe कि अभी जो recently हुई थी उससे पहले after a very very long time Pakistan is holding such a conference of this level. Why do you think it's important and more importantly एजेंडा में हम क्या देख रहे हैं कि इसमें क्या चीज़ें डिस्कस होंगी, एंड ऑल्सो अ लिटिल बिट अबाउट कि कौन कौन सी कंट्रीज़ पार्टिसिपेट कर रही हैं जो हमें पता है कंफर्म, जिनके फॉरेन मिनिस्टर्स आ रहे हैं.
Well, thank you, Muzamil. Thank you for having us. I mean, first of all, the importance of OIC itself. It is the second largest international organization in the world after the UN. So it has 57 members.
Right.
So the significance of OIC is quite clear, and for Pakistan more so, because Pakistan is not only a founding member of OIC, it has throughout these years has played a really influential and leading role at the OIC, and we have held OIC summits and ministerial meetings before. So this particular session is obviously important if you look at the regional and global context. Significant developments are taking place in our neighborhood and beyond, and apart from that, you would have noticed that the dates are coinciding with the 23rd March. So we are celebrating this year 75 years of our independence. So
right.
I would say it is important from that perspective also. Pakistan throughout these decades has contributed to OIC's objectives and interests, promoting peace and justice within the Islamic world, and advocating OIC's role globally.
Do you think the guests will be participating in the parade as well, or will be no?
Yes.
Okay.
So the visiting ministers and heads of delegations, they will be our guests of honor.
Right.
On 23rd at the Pakistan Day Parade. So, this makes this event all the more historic in that sense. So I think this is a great show of support and solidarity, if you can say, from the Islamic world towards Pakistan. So it is significant in many aspects. And as for agenda, Kashmir, apart from Palestine, these two are,
the most important ones.
Amongst the most significant events on the agenda of the OIC. So they're going to be discussed at length.
Right.
And they're going to be important outcomes on both. The OIC members are going to reiterate, I'm sure, their firm support for the right to self-determination of the Kashmiri and the Palestinian people. And apart from that, there will be many other things. Afghanistan will be again reviewed. We just had the ministerial meeting in December. There are other issues like Islamophobia. This is going to be on the agenda. And then on the economic and social and cultural side, there will be a host of matters that will come under discussion. I think a common concern for all OIC countries is the recovery post-COVID. So this is going to be an important thing. And we have other initiatives that we are bringing up at the OIC. And I'm sure apart from all this, what's happening currently in our region and beyond, that's going to be part of the discussion as well.
Right. And who all are we expecting to participate?
Well, in terms of participation, all 57 members of OIC, they are participating. And we have significantly high-level representation, more than 45 at ministerial level, other high-level delegations. And we have the observer states, and there are 6 observers at OIC. And then many countries and organizations, they have their special envoys and representatives towards OIC. They are going to participate. And then there are other institutions, bodies related to OIC and other regional organizations like the UN, the Arab League, ECO, and African Union. So it's going to be, a big show.
Right. थोड़ा सा मुझे बताइएगा, this is for the first time, and Rizwan Saeed, if you take this question, this is the first time that All Parties Hurriyat Conference has been invited to the OIC as well, as per my understanding.
No.
Have they been invited before as well?
Yes.
And we saw, okay, there has been a reaction from India on this, and obviously they've been pretty vocal about this as well. Why do you think inviting them is important? And we've already talked about Kashmir being a very important part of the agenda. How do you think this impacts the overall proceedings of this conference and potentially what we can gain out of it?
Well, since as the spokesperson has already mentioned, Kashmir is amongst the longest standing items on the OIC agenda. There has been this tradition at the OIC to invite the true representatives of Kashmiri people. And they not only participate in the contact group on Jammu and Kashmir that has been constituted by the Council of Foreign Ministers to directly deal with the Kashmir dispute, but they also get to speak at the main plenary to address the conference. And that tradition has been there for a while, as I said, and it's not the first time that APHC representation has been invited to an OIC CFM. They have even been invited to summits previously. But India's reaction is certainly out of a guilt that there. Because they definitely, more than anybody else, in their heart of heart, know that they have unleashed havoc in terms of the human rights and humanitarian situation in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. So expecting from them that they would let the APHC leadership participate in this OIC conference is anybody's guess. So the fact is that 2 leaders that have been invited are under detention. They are incarcerated. It's Mirwais Umar Farooq, who has previously participated even one of the OIC summits that was held in Dakar in Senegal in 2008. And then there is Musarrat Alam Bhatt, so again behind the bars on false and fake charges. So this is a clear demonstration for the world to see that not only that the leadership, the true representatives of the Kashmiri people are not being allowed the full scope of their basic human rights, but the international opinion, international community, international organizations are not being allowed to talk to them directly, not to have them, not to let them have their say. Right. In terms of what exactly is the situation in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, particularly post 5th August 2019. So it's a clear demonstration, and it is for the whole world to see, the OIC geography to see. And since, as the spokesperson has already mentioned, there will be special envoys from most of the Western countries like UK, United States, France. All the P5 are represented in one or the other way. Russia is an observer at the OIC. There is Australia, Canada, all the other countries. Most of the important countries are represented at this gathering. They would get to see for themselves as to what is the situation with regard to freedom and the fundamental freedoms. Human rights and humanitarian situation is already in front of their eyes. It is for them now to draw the right conclusions. Right. And not only that, OIC would be making strong pronouncements in this regard at the Islamabad CFM. The other countries, the special envoys that are participating, should also take home with them this message of India not allowing participation of the true representatives, and then we hope that the international community will take action accordingly.
Right.
I think what Rizwan was saying, that is precisely the reason the Indians would not let the true representatives of the Kashmiri people to come and attend, because they have, a lot to hide.
Right.
So they would not like the Kashmiri leaders to come to this stage where international presence is there, and the whole world is watching, for them to come and inform directly from the ground as to what is the situation there. So they cannot come anyway because they are in detention. And the other thing is that, the way they object to the participation of the Kashmiri leadership, the reason that they come up with is totally baseless and flimsy. The same.
What's the reason that they give?
The same stuff that they say that Kashmir is an internal matter, or
Right.
integral part of India.
But this is just a conversation at the end of the day, right? And so if you have nothing to hide, you'd have the freedom of speech too.
No one in the entire international community believes or accepts India's position that this is an internal matter. It is not. It is a internationally recognized dispute. It is on the agenda of the UN Security Council. And it is very clearly stated that this is a disputed territory, and it has to be resolved by peaceful means, yes, through a plebiscite or a referendum where the people of Kashmir have to decide, about their future. So, it is very clear why the Indians would not allow the Kashmiri leadership to appear in such forums.
Right. In terms of, if I make it a little more macro, in terms of the OIC's role on Kashmir, can you tell me a little bit about the history of what's been going on there? Particularly because previously we've heard, conversations about the silence of the OIC, and so I'd like a detailed sort of analysis on that.
Right. Let me preface the answer to this question by emphasizing that OIC is a political organization.
Right.
And only a political course of action can and should be expected from OIC. OIC is the second largest international organization with 57 member states. And the significance of OIC's consistent support, the political support that OIC has been offering to the Kashmiri people, is not only enhanced, but it has become paramount since the 5th of August 2019, because increasingly the matter has evolved since then as a legal issue, as a legal discourse, because India has blatantly violated international law of all sorts. The humanitarian law, international human rights law, Fourth Geneva Convention, all sorts of laws have been violated in the wake of the illegal action, and the litany of illegal actions since have been taken by India. So in this legal discussion, increasingly legal discourse, say for instance, if Pakistan says that and raises the voice about the rights or the case of Kashmiri people, it would be construed by international public opinion that it's natural. We are a party to the dispute, so we get to say our piece. And it would perhaps, if you look at it from an international public opinion's perspective, be not that much, strong.
Right.
But when OIC, being the second largest international organization, puts its entire weight of 57 member states on Pakistan's side, on Pakistan's political legal case consistently, year after year, session after session, it really not only means something, it is indispensable to Pakistan's position on the Jammu and Kashmir dispute, because what OIC does is that it keeps reiterating the relevance of the UN Security Council resolutions, session after session, meeting after meeting, at all tiers. The CFM, the summit, even in the sectoral meetings, the relevant aspects of the Kashmir dispute are pointed out by the OIC. And this principled stand of OIC, with particular reference to the relevance of UN resolutions, is precious.
Right.
And this is something that needs to be promoted. And with this CFM, the coming CFM, being held in Islamabad, and this issue again being a center of attention, definitely, as Pakistan's public opinion, Pakistani media is looking at it with a great deal of expectation. We hope, and inshallah, we should be successful in perhaps giving OIC's role a more action and result orientation during this meeting, and that is how we will approach this discussion, and inshallah something good will come out of it.
Right. Again, keeping the light on the same issue, but sort of again making it a bit more macro. We're seeing a rise in Islamophobia within India as well. We've seen the Muskan video. We've seen a lot of these sort of lynchings that have been happening. And somehow it hasn't been internationalized the way that a lot of other things across the globe end up being. Particularly when it's right there in front of you. There's a lot of footage available. There's a lot of content there available as well. Obviously, OIC being this conference of Islamic countries, do you think this could potentially be a time to internationalize exactly what's going on? Because for a lot of people, they're saying this is basically the entry point to a potential genocide that could happen if things keep on going in the same way. And we've seen that happen across the globe. Previously, when genocides have happened, this is where this is always the starting point, right? And so how important do you think, we've been talking about Islamophobia very strongly. This government has been definitely very vocal about it. Pakistan's Foreign Office have been very vocal about it. We've seen the designation of 15th March as the International Day Against Islamophobia as well. Do you think that will come under discussion at this OIC as well?
Certainly, it would come under discussion. And since India clearly is a red blinking light when it comes to Islamophobia on the world map today, there's going to be a focus as well. And the actions taken by the Indian government, and that is certainly inspired by the Hindutva ideology over the past at least 2 years, would be the center of attention, would be flagged, would certainly be taken note of by the OIC. And it is expected that the whole catalog of those actions would not only be condemned and brought to book, but OIC, as again with 57 member states, is going to make very strong pronouncements on a rejection of all these actions, and ensuring that the Muslim minority in India is given its due rights, because OIC is the natural leader on Islamophobia. With most of its member states being Muslim majority states, it has not only a constitutional in terms of its charter, but a moral and political duty to ensure protection of rights of Muslim minorities in non-member states. There is a whole agenda item. And under that rubric, we hope strong outcomes. And it is also opportune that this meeting is taking place on the heels of this adoption of the unanimous adoption of the UNGA resolution on declaring 15th of March as the Combating International Islamophobia Day internationally. Again, this is the right time to have this discussion, and not only to have this discussion, an opening has been provided by this resolution. There are other facets and dimensions, including the geographical dimension where India comes into focus on Islamophobia, and it is definitely realistic, natural and rightful to expect that there would be discussion, there would be outcomes.
Right. And I think you have to look at the bigger picture also on this. Yes, you're right. And as Rizwan said, I think the biggest demonstration and concern about Islamophobia, that's what we are, right now watching in what is happening in our eastern neighbor. And going beyond that, I think what we are doing, the effort that Pakistan has undertaken through OIC, and you mentioned the International Day to Combat Islamophobia, the resolution that has been adopted by consensus by the UN General Assembly, and OIC was the real force behind this. So, we got the OIC together to bring this case at the international level at the UN in New York, and we were able to to get this successfully. This is not, it needs to be understood that we are not carrying any confrontationist approach. This is something that, yes, we are trying to create awareness about the dangers of Islamophobia, and India is a prime example. But what we are trying to promote and advocate is greater harmony and understanding and interreligious harmony. This is the crux of the resolution also that has been adopted at the UN General Assembly. So this is a positive thing, and this is a positive vibe that Pakistan has led at the global forum at the UN, and I think that is why we see that all regions, from Europeans to Africans, Latin Americans, Asians, they came together, and there was unanimous support for this resolution. Only I think one country was clearly on the defensive, and that was India, and for obvious reasons, because
Do you think with this, because Pakistan was a very key sponsor of this particular resolution, probably my question will be divided into two parts. Why do you think this was so incredibly important at this point in time? I do understand there's a global change in terms of how a lot of things are changing across the globe, and Islamophobia is definitely on the rise. But why do you think it was important for Pakistan to first of all actively work on this? And then secondly, do you think such a resolution, having such a day, could potentially support the cause, not just in India, but we're seeing that happen across the globe. There's a certain way that Muslims have been treated over the past few decades, and obviously there's growing resentment within the Muslim world as well because of that. So how important do you think this particular resolution and this particular day, now that it's been passed unanimously at the UN, has been?
Because the issue has been there, and it was kind of exacerbated in the wake of 9/11.
Right.
The discrimination towards Muslims, and even leading to sometimes violence and exclusion. Lots of problems were cropping up. In Europe, in the West, but elsewhere as well. And India is a prime example in recent years, the way Islamophobia has come up. So it was being discussed also, but not in the manner that it would really gain the attention of the international community. So this is what the Prime Minister has been able to do, especially his address to the UN General Assembly in 2019, where he focused largely, apart from Kashmir, he focused on Islamophobia. And, he reflected the sentiments of not only the Muslims in Pakistan, but all over the world, that, we want the international community to understand our feelings towards our beloved Holy Prophet. And, why is it that we want, full respect that is due. So that was the turning point, and then we built on that, and we were able to forge consensus in OIC and at the global level at the UN. And as I was saying earlier, I think yes, it is a resolution which talks about Islamophobia, but when you look at the text of the resolution, it clearly says we want to promote respect for all faiths and religions. This is very important, because
right.
If you don't do that, you cannot have your objective with regard to Islamophobia. So the objective is to create awareness and to promote dialogue and interfaith and intercultural, intercivilizational harmony. I think this is the positive thing that Pakistan has brought.
Right. I'm going to move the conversation away from India for a bit and just take it to Afghanistan, and just kind of take a step back, go towards the meeting that happened in December last year. That was exclusively focused on Afghanistan. What was the outcome of that, and what's happened ever since? And do you think Afghanistan, or rather Early on, you mentioned that there will be a review for what was discussed early on. Do you think there's something new that may come up in regards to Afghanistan, particularly in the context of when we saw that the Afghan money, the almost, I think, $11-12 billion, half of it, essentially was released for the Afghani people, but the remainder of it continues to stay in the West. And we're also seeing a huge economic crisis within Afghanistan. There's essentially no real economy, and there's been a sort of a freeze on their government and their acknowledgement and really what's going to happen in regards to Afghanistan. So first of all, just trying to understand what happened in December and what can we expect to come out over the next couple of days.
Well, in December, and this was again Pakistan's initiative together with Saudi Arabia to convene this extraordinary or special session on Afghanistan. And the focus was on two things, the humanitarian crisis and, as you also mentioned, the economic crisis. And we were able to bring not only the Islamic world together, but other, important partners and stakeholders. The P5 countries were there, and, the UN was there, and the international financial institutions and others. And the outcome was very significant. 2 or 3 main things from the outcome. One was the decision to establish a OIC humanitarian trust fund on Afghanistan. And that has, all the groundwork has been done, and tomorrow is going to be, the signing ceremony of the charter of this trust fund. This is a significant progress. Secondly, a special envoy was appointed on Afghanistan. He is in place, and he's been, doing his work, reaching out to OIC and others to see how OIC can assist with regard to the humanitarian and economic crisis in Afghanistan. And there was another element of strengthening the OIC's presence and office in Afghanistan, and I think there is a lot of progress on that also. I think Rizwan, dealing directly with some of these issues, may like to add maybe something on this.
No, certainly. One important thing to note perhaps is, and that should be the point of departure in any analysis on this issue, is this OIC is uniquely poised to deal with this issue because of its, positive access that it has in Afghanistan, because it is certainly identified as an organization of Muslim majority states. Afghanistan has been a founding member of the organization. So it was in that spirit that OIC organized that extraordinary conference in Islamabad. And as the spokesperson has mentioned, that there were key outcomes. For instance, on the Afghan Humanitarian Trust Fund, it was a deliberate and a conscious decision at the OIC to let the Islamic Development Bank run that particular trust fund. And as has been pointed out, the charter signing ceremony is going to take place tomorrow. The reason is that Islamic Development Bank has a credibility. It has a AAA rating in terms of all the rating agencies in the financial arena. And that credibility is important for not only operationalizing this trust fund, but carrying the effort, because as the Prime Minister pointed out in his keynote address at that OIC extraordinary CFM session, it is not going to be only the humanitarian effort, because you cannot expect Afghanistan to be restricted, or the people of Afghanistan to be restricted to dole-outs from international community. You need to revive the economy there. So it is going to be a medium-term effort, and there's going to be a long-term development effort that should be sequenced. It should be so sequenced by OIC. And with the credibility of Islamic Development Bank, it is important to note that it's not just the OIC, but other international organizations, including the relevant UN agencies. And that is how the charter has been designed. Once the details come out, you will take a look at it in a very flexible fashion, that other international organizations in areas of humanitarian assistance, food, health, etc., could use that platform that ingress, that unique poise that OIC has with regard to taking any action in Afghanistan. And the more important thing, of course, would be for the OIC member states to make adequate pledges to keep that fund running. And it is a long drawn out effort, certainly. And the special envoy would be presenting a report because it was so mandated in the last paragraph of the resolution that was adopted in the extraordinary session and discussed with the special envoy just today, because he already arrived in Islamabad. The report is ready. It is a rather lengthy report, so there is definitely too much to report on. The special envoy was in Kabul about 10 days back, so and he has been consulting some key member states. So that progress would also be reflected and presented to the member states. And then it would be, as you have mentioned, for the member states to determine the future course of action, which mandates are to be renewed, which are to be added to. Certainly a good outcome, a strong outcome is on the cards.
Right. Asim Saab, we've been seeing this, 2022 started with a lot of, with a fundamental shift in how we're seeing what's happening across the globe, particularly in context of the Russian and Ukraine crisis. We're almost seeing, the world going back to the Cold War era. And by and large, the Muslim world is after a very, very long time, disconnected from a major conflict. What do you think is going on in the minds of the OIC when they're looking at this conflict? I know for a fact that Pakistan was sort of pushed into or was being forced to get into this conflict, and that became a huge controversy as well. We've seen allies are or formal allies are beginning to change the way that they used to deal with, their conventional friends, and new friends and foes are being created on the go. So just tell me a little bit about what's the thought process of the OIC in general and the Muslim countries in general and Pakistan in the context of the Ukraine and Russia crisis?
Because as I mentioned in the beginning, this is an important development. And obviously, with an OIC meeting taking place, many ministers participating, you can expect that, some of them would like to refer to this and, bring this in discussion. Eventually, it is, individual positions of the member states, because this issue per se is not on the agenda of the OIC, but you can expect that views will be expressed. As far as Pakistan's position is concerned, I think, and we have stated it quite clearly, that we always take positions which are, which portray and which would safeguard Pakistan's own national interest. And I think this is true for every country. So you have to keep that in mind. Secondly, we have said that, and you refer to, the revival of Cold War and bloc politics. We have said repeatedly that we do not want to be, part of any bloc politics. And we want to be partner in peace and not in conflict. And now this conflict, it is remote, from us. We have no direct involvement in it. And it is also important to recall that Pakistan has excellent relations with both Russia and Ukraine. Both are our friends. The Prime Minister was recently in Russia. And Ukraine is a very close partner of Pakistan as well. So, looking at all of this, our position needs to be understood. It's a delicate issue. That's why I'm saying it needs to be understood clearly, because some people have not understood it clearly. I think we have taken an objective position on the question of principles. The respect for the UN Charter, sovereignty and territorial integrity, self-determination, pacific settlement of disputes, equal security for all. We have clearly said that, we are committed to that. And actually, we have reminded the international community that these principles should be universally upheld and applied. There should be no, discrimination or double standards or selectivity in the application. And we have seen that, these principles are selectively applied by many countries. So that is something to be clarified. Secondly, the Prime Minister said, and I think it has been proven correct, that conflict is in no one's interest, and it is going to affect the developing countries the most. And we are already experiencing the effects of this conflict in terms of oil prices and food supply chains and many other things. So that is also very clearly stated by Pakistan. And thirdly, we are calling for immediate cessation of hostilities. We have been emphasizing right from the beginning that diplomacy has to step in, and there has to be dialogue and negotiations. We continue to say that, and we are encouraging. So we have reached out to both Ukraine and Russia, and we have reached out. The foreign minister has spoken to the neighboring countries, Romania, Poland, Hungary. We have spoken to the European Union and others, the Chinese, and the purpose is to convey our position. I think we have placed ourselves in such a manner that we have contacts with both sides, and we are in a position that we can encourage both sides to have constructive dialogue and negotiations. I think in the end, most of the countries are saying that this has to be resolved through dialogue. So this is what we are encouraging. On the humanitarian side, the situation is very, very serious, yes, and I think that needs to be acknowledged. And it is for that reason, and taking into account our very good relations with Ukraine, that Pakistan has also dispatched humanitarian assistance for Ukraine.
Right. If I were to sort of look slight towards the east, and we see Pakistan getting into this sort of economic program with China, with CPEC, and we're also seeing that in terms of our national policy, we've started to talk about economic security in the past couple of years. That's becoming incredibly important in terms of our own national security. But whenever we look at the OIC, we never really think economics, and we never really talk economics. And so individually, there have been smaller blocks and smaller sort of organizations that do talk about the economic connectivity. And even within our own, whenever we talk about economic security for Pakistan, we're looking at Central Asia, definitely. We're looking at, maybe connectivity through Iran and Turkey. We're definitely looking at China and then connecting them to, let's say, Africa and the Middle East, maybe. But in terms of OIC, this is an incredibly large, like Rizwan Saeed mentioned earlier, the second largest organization in the world. They have almost 1/4 of the global population, an incredibly huge amount of GDP as well. Do you think there is value, and particularly I'm going to add in the context of the changing dynamics of the global world order, do you think there is a value for the Muslim countries to begin to have the conversation of economics, whether be it trade, connectivity, whether be it financial, the way the financial systems are dealt with? You earlier mentioned the Islamic Development Bank. What's the conversation in terms of economic security for Pakistan and for all of these other countries that are connected through this conference?
I think exactly, and yes, there is value, and I think this is one area that has been sort of, you can say, has been neglected or not given the right focus, and the true potential, the economic potential of the Islamic world we have not been able to exploit. You mentioned that the Islamic world represents about 1/4 of the world population, but in terms of contribution to global GDP, it is only about 7 to 8%.
Right.
So we are lagging far behind, and very rightly pointed out by you, this is one area in which there is a lot of potential for cooperation. And I think what we think is that if we are able to promote this cooperation on the economic front, connectivity, trade, and investment, it will forge even greater political unity and coherence among the Islamic countries. And so this is something that Pakistan is going to promote during its chairmanship of the Council of Foreign Ministers. As far as Pakistan itself is concerned, we have stated clearly that in our policy there is a refocusing from geopolitics to geoeconomics, and we are saying that three key pillars: regional peace and stability, friendly neighborhood, and partnerships and connectivity. And you mentioned Central Asia, Iran, Turkey, Africa, Middle East, and
they're all Muslim countries. So you just
look at it with the CPEC and BRI, and BRI is not limited to CPEC alone. It's not limited to Pakistan. CPEC is the flagship project, but many over 100 countries around the globe, they are part of BRI. So there can be a lot more synchronization and synergy between BRI and similar projects, and I think we are going to focus on this economic side. We have other things that can complement, like cooperation in science and technology. I think Pakistan is a leader in that dimension also in the Islamic world. So we are looking at re-energizing discussion within the OIC in this direction. I think this is going to be one significant contribution that we are looking to bring to the table at the OIC during the next 1 year.
Right.
And actually a singularly significant exponent of what Asim has just said is the fact that, as he mentioned in the beginning, the theme.
Right.
Partnering for unity, justice, and development.
Right.
So development is clearly a key element there. Well, OIC has a broad geographical spread. Maybe not the whole membership is geographically contiguous. So normally economic blocks are identified or associated with geographical contiguity. But there are steps in OIC already undergoing programs. Islamic Development Bank, as I mentioned, has already contributed since its establishment to the tune of $65 billion of disbursement amongst its member states, AAA rating. It's a performing institution. There is a Statistical Economic and Research Center, Social Cultural Research Center in Ankara. SESREC it is called. There's the Islamic Center for Trade Development that is based in Morocco. And maybe it would be a good news, for your viewers, that it's not just the Council of Foreign Ministers meeting that Pakistan is hosting this year. Because of our development focus and the geo-economic reset that we have just accomplished in our foreign policy, Pakistan is also going to host the OIC Trade Fair this year.
Oh, really?
In maybe Lahore, if not Islamabad. Right. That remains to be decided.
Right.
But there's going to be, again, 57 member states expected to participate in an OIC-wide trade fair, and there would be this opportunity to engage and connect with Africa, Central Asia, all the countries, the Middle East that have been mentioned. There is also a trade preferential system at the OIC that has been negotiated. And when you negotiate an international covenant or a treaty, there always is a legal requirement or a threshold of a sufficient number of signatures and ratifications. So that is awaited, and maybe during the chairmanship of Pakistan, we'll at least give it a go. That trade preferential system also comes into play, enters into force. So the countries signing on to that would be exchanging trade concessions. And it is our effort and endeavor that during our chairmanship and beyond, the trade, as Asim has mentioned, it is insignificant, and the GDP compared to the global GDP is insignificant. We would endeavor to take it further, enhance and expand the scope of this engagement for everybody's advantage in the OIC membership.
That makes a lot of sense. One of the questions that's been on my mind over the past few years has been that we've seen the Foreign Office of Pakistan take a very active role compared to being very passive, at least for a an ordinary observer. What do you think has changed over the past few years? Not just in terms of the communication that's been coming out, but also in terms of the way that the entire organization has been working across the globe in terms of the Pakistani missions and the Pakistani consulates. There's been a lot of innovation as well. And my family, I have brothers in the US. They've been pretty satisfied with some of the changes that have happened over the recent years. Can you tell me a little bit about what's really changed here?
Yes. I think there has been gradual progress and improvement in many things, but in recent years, it has happened at a very fast pace. And I think we must acknowledge the way the foreign minister has led this effort, and the overall guidance of the Prime Minister on many, many aspects. We have seen the results. For example, the foreign minister has given very keen attention to aspects such as public diplomacy, right, in economic diplomacy. So, if you look at the performance indicators for our ambassadors abroad, the economic indicators, trade, investment, and these things, reaching out to public, use of social media, reaching out to the civil society, all of this has progressed at a very fast pace. And then the foreign minister is very hands-on, and he's in direct contact with the junior most, from the senior most to the junior most officers. There is an app in our internal app, FM Direct. Any officer in the ministry or in missions abroad can send a message, a suggestion, or anything directly to the foreign minister, and he responds. Right. So there is this kind of environment,
very agile and very sort of hands-on.
So we've seen the results. You were mentioning, for example, public service delivery, the kind of attention that has been given to Pakistani community abroad, diaspora, looking at their long-standing problems like, attestations, power of attorney. You recall the Prime Minister himself inaugurated the automation of the power of attorney system. So, we've brought in a lot of technology and automation in the way we, deal with the issues confronting the community. And there has been a direct outreach, through e-kacheris and kuli kacheris and open door policy. Any embassy, you would notice that the ambassador and the officers are available, all the time. And people can walk in.
Right.
So there is this great enhancement, visually to the public and behind the scenes, and also openly, I think, on major foreign policy issues. There has been a lot of dynamism. I think we have focused on areas that were slightly, out of focus previously. Africa, for example, Latin America, Vision East Asia policy is being pursued more vigorously. Similarly, Central Asia. So I think on the whole, there is a lot of dynamism, and I think we draw a lot of satisfaction from doing all this.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to move on to the last two questions, and I'd like your comment on that. First being the socials or the social media accounts of a few embassies that have recently been hacked, and it's been happening fairly regularly, and so cyber attacks have been definitely increasing on Pakistani mission accounts across the globe. I believe the most recent one was only a few weeks ago. What is the foreign ministry or the foreign office doing to ensure the security? Because these are very, very sensitive and important assets, right, in the postmodern world. And so what is being done to ensure that such things do not happen again?
Yeah, I think when this happened once or twice, we had a look at our SOPs and, the guidance that is there for our embassies. And the result is that, such attacks maybe will continue to happen, but I think we are more prepared now to respond quickly and to limit the
impact of those
damage. Yes.
Yeah.
So, and that we have shown in the last one or two. But there are other procedures that we are following, and we are undertaking training sessions also for our officers who deal with social media handles abroad. And I think there's a lot of improvement, but still, we keep a tab on this, and we also consult our technical ministries on how to do this better.
Right. Yeah. The last question is pertaining to a recent incident that happened, in Pakistan, where a rogue missile essentially came from India and landed in Pakistan. For a lot of people, the way that it happened, a lot of people are in shock to think something like this could happen, in terms of, first of all, the incident happening in the first place, and then the response that was generated, which seemed quite sloppy considering the fact that these are two nuclear-armed countries. And any misadventure could have resulted in potentially the deaths of millions of people. And it's extremely, extremely serious. But somehow the international community has not taken it as seriously as it should have been. What do you think is the government of Pakistan doing, and particularly the Foreign Office? And are you pursuing that, or do you think it happened, you had a conversation, and now you're moving on?
No, this was, a grave incident. And I think, the severity of this incident, it needs to be highlighted. This is what we have done. You maybe right in a way that, the kind of serious response that it warranted from the international community, it's not yet there. And that's why we're not letting it go. In that way. So you would have seen our statements. I think the kind of response that the Indian side has come up with is not at all satisfactory. It is not sufficient. That's why we are not, ready to accept that. We have clearly stated that, this needs to be investigated properly and fully. We have proposed that there be a joint investigation or probe. We have put forward a number of fundamental questions that I think India needs to answer. I think these answers are required not only by Pakistan, but by the international community, because this is something that, as you said, it cannot be taken lightly. The kind of simplistic explanation that the Indians have come up with, they're not sufficient. No one is going to believe that. So we are going to push this. We have briefed and consulted many countries already on this, the P5, the Europeans and others. The Foreign Minister has spoken to the UN Secretary General. We have written to the UN Security Council, bringing this matter to their attention, and even the UN Security Council has been asked that they should demand from India that they must accept a joint investigation on this incident. This is something that we will continue to pursue and highlight.
Right. Sir, thank you so much for this, for taking the time out, for sharing all the insight. And I know that the next 3 days are incredibly important. I hope that, inshallah, we should be able to get the outcomes that we're hoping for. I wish you all the very best, and looking forward to seeing, what comes out of the OIC.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And for all of you guys, thank you so much for watching. अगर आपको ये एपिसोड पसंद आई और दोस्तों यहाँ ज़रूर शेयर करिएगा. आप इन तमाम बातों के बारे में, if you have any comments, do let us know in the comment section below. For people on YouTube, if you like the channel, the video is going to get more views. For people on audio platforms, you can subscribe the channel and you'd get notifications for the future episodes. If you like to support the channel, there's an easy paisa Jazz Cash prompt that's appearing anywhere over here. We accept anything from 1 rupee to as much as you'd like. It's the thought that counts. But anyways, this was Muzamil Hasan. You were watching Thought Behind Things. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.